Hey, everybody, welcome back to the second episode of The Ultimate Sacrifice. My name's Louis Marsh. I'm your host for this show, and today we're continuing our look at Medal of Honor winners from D-Day, and then we'll follow that when we finished all four of those men with other men who won the Medal of Honor in the Normandy campaign. And today we're taking a look at Jimmy Waters Monteith Jr. Jimmy was born July 1st, 1917 in Lowmore, Virginia. Here's a picture of what it looks like now. We couldn't really find anything from back in the day. His family moved to Richmond, Virginia when he was 9 years old, and after elementary school, he attended Thomas Jefferson High School. Here's a picture. It pretty much looks the same as it did back when Jimmy was there, I think. He played a year each of varsity football and varsity basketball while in high school. He was known in high school as Punk. Now, that may tell us a lot about his personality. I don't know, but it's an interesting nickname. He graduated in 1937. He attended Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University for 2 years, 1937 to 39, majoring in mechanical engineering. While at VPI, he was a member of K Company in the Corps of Cadets and the Richmond Sectional Club. He returned to Richmond at the end of his sophomore year and worked as a field representative for the Cabell Coal Company, where his father was the vice president. Now, we have some pictures here of him in college, and you'll notice a couple of these. He's with a young lady. We assume this was his sweetheart at the time, although we don't know. He was drafted into the Army in October of 1941 and sent to Camp Croft, South Carolina, for basic training. And we have some pictures here of Camp Croft, what it looked like then and what they were doing. During basic, he was promoted to corporal and applied for officer training. So we can tell that Jimmy was a man who had some ambition. He was accepted and sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, completing the course in March of 1942 when he was commissioned a second lieutenant. He was then transferred to Fort McClellan, Alabama, where he helped train the 15th Battalion. In February of 1943, he was transferred into the 30th Division, and the 30th at this time was stationed at Camp Blanding, Florida, and there he began training in preparation for being shipped overseas to get into the war. In April of 1943, he was shipped to Algeria, where he joined the 1st Infantry Division. Yes, the big red one, just like we talked about last week. It's back this week. The division moved to Sicily in July of 1943, and he received a field promotion to 1st Lieutenant during that campaign. The division moved to England in November of 1943 to prepare for the Normandy landings. Then, in 1944, 1st Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith and his men from L Company of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, were supposed to land with his right flank next to the left shoulder of I and F companies. You can see on these maps here, which are amazing maps. This is how they plan all amphibious landings. They give sectors for each unit and all that. But then what happens is, well, the war happens, the weather happens, the ocean happens, and guess what? Jimmy's company did not land right next to F Company. It landed 500 yards to the left of their targeted landing zone. Now, Company L had taken casualties on the way to the beach, and upon landing had been reduced to just 125 men. Even with being in the wrong place and under fire, it was only one of 8 companies in the initial assault wave that was operational as a unit. Under Monteith's leadership, the company crossed the beach to the bottom of the nearby cliffs. Now, despite all the incessant fire that was going on, Monteith returned to the beach to locate 2 surviving Sherman DD tanks. Now, if you don't know what the DD tanks were, DD stands for duplex drive, and they were designed to be amphibious. Believe it or not, I've got some pictures here where they put up this big canvas thing in front of them, and it would actually work to support the weight of the tank. They didn't do very well on D-Day because, unfortunately, the seas were rough and the DDs could not handle rough weather very well at all. But a few did get to the beach, and they were extremely valuable in helping, of course, the men, use their big guns to help fight the Germans. On foot, Monteith led the 2 tanks through a German minefield and into a firing position where they could destroy a pillbox and 2 machine gun nests that were holding up the American advance. With those strong points now neutralized, Monteith was able to lead a flanking assault on the German strong point. The fight to outflank the formidable position lasted about an hour, and at the end of it, Monteith and his men were on top of the hill past WN 60. Now, the Germans, and you can see from these pictures I'll show you, had set up most of the defenses in these strong points they called WN, and they were numbered 60, 61, 62. And they were sort of self-contained little islands where you had infantry, you had mortars, you had artillery, you had lots of machine guns. They were all designed to sort of defend themselves, even if the Americans kind of worked past them a little bit. By 9 a.m., the position had finally fallen, and the surviving Germans who had manned it had surrendered, following an assault by other elements of L Company. With Monteith and his men in the lead, Allied troops began to move inland and seize objectives. Now off the beach and past the German strongpoints, Monteith and his men would confront a new and deadly challenge. Seeking to drive back the tentative American advance, German soldiers counterattacked a few hours later. Monteith, ignoring his own safety, repeatedly moved amongst his men, directing their actions. The German counterattacks eventually managed to cut off and surround Monteith's unit. Now, he used a variety of grenades, knocked out 2 German machine guns that were seeking to annihilate his company. When the fire opened up on another flank, Monteith immediately moved once more across an open field in the face of machine gun fire to help his men fight off the new threat. Reportedly, some of his last words were about concern for his men's well-being before he went to confront the new German attack. By this time, the lieutenant's luck had run out, as he was struck and killed by German machine gun fire. So his unit was surrounded, but Monteith fought to the end. Jimmy Monteith was one of more than 2,400 soldiers killed or wounded on Omaha Beach on D-Day. And on March 29, 1945, Monteith would become one of 3 soldiers at Omaha Beach awarded the Medal of Honor. I could not find any pictures of the award ceremony, unfortunately. We know that he is buried today at the ABMC Normandy Cemetery at Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, France. His Medal of Honor was presented to his family, as we said, in Richmond, Virginia, by Brigadier General Frank Dorn, who went on to fight in the Pacific Theater. And here's how the Medal of Honor citation for Jimmy reads: "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, on June 6, 1944, near Colvert-sur-Mer, France, First Lieutenant Monteith landed with the initial assault waves on the coast of France under heavy enemy fire. Without regard for his own personal safety, he continually moved up and down the beach, reorganizing men for further assault. He then led the assault over a narrow protective ledge and across the flat, exposed terrain to the comparative safety of a cliff. Retracing his steps across the field to the beach, he moved over to where 2 tanks were buttoned up and blind under violent enemy artillery and machine gun fire. Completely exposed to the intense fire, First Lieutenant Monteith led the tanks on foot through a minefield and into firing positions. Under his directions, several enemy positions were destroyed. He then rejoined the company, and under his leadership, his men captured an advantageous position on the hill. Supervising the defense of his newly won position against repeated vicious counterattacks, he continued to ignore his own personal safety and repeatedly crossed the 200 to 300-yard open terrain under heavy fire to strengthen links in his defensive chain. When the enemy succeeded in completely surrounding First Lieutenant Monteith and his unit, and while leading the fight out of the situation, First Lieutenant Monteith was killed by enemy fire. The courage, gallantry, and intrepid leadership displayed by First Lieutenant Monteith is worthy of emulation." And that's his citation. Now, since the war and his sacrifice has been remembered and honored in many ways, here's just a few. The U.S. military named a base, they called it Camp Monteith, when they were in Kosovo in the 1990s. Monteith Hall at Virginia Tech was built in 1949. Jimmy W. Monteith Jr. Amphitheater is in Fort McClellan, Alabama. Jimmy W. Monteith Jr. Barracks in Firth, Germany, Monteith Street at Fort Rucker, Alabama, Jimmy W. Monteith Memorial Bridge at the Lowmore exit of I-64 in Allegheny County, Virginia, his hometown. And finally, First Lieutenant Jimmy Monteith, United States Army Reserve Center in Richmond, Virginia. What a guy, what a man, and what a loss to lose such a man, but what an honor to have such men as these defend our freedom. Let's stop for a moment today and give thanks for Jimmy and all the men like him who allow us to be free today. Until next week, when we'll look at another D-Day Medal of Honor winner, thank you for watching. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Footnotes. As usual, we're a little more casual around here, as you can see, during Footnotes than we are the main presentation. I wanted to talk to you just a little bit today about something that we didn't really get a chance to hit on in the main show, and that is these German resistance nests. That's what the WNs are. You'll notice that one of them, you can see on this map I'm showing you now, one of them is actually right next to and leads into the American cemetery on Omaha Beach, which is, of course, a place I've never been to, but many people have, and I've talked to them about it, and it's quite a moving experience. I didn't know that German prisoners dug at least some, if not all, the graves. I've never actually looked into the history of how the cemetery was put together, but here's a picture showing that. But what I really wanted to do was go back to a TV special that was on CBS News with Walter Cronkite, and he went over on the 20th anniversary of D-Day. Yeah, the 20th anniversary. I was a little boy. I remember watching this. That's how old I am. And he took President General Eisenhower with him. Now, Ike had already served his presidency. He was retired, living right near Gettysburg. And he went back for this, and he and Walter drove around the beach and went to different places and talked. And there's a still photo here of him looking into the camera, and he's at the cemetery. And I want you to look at this man. Here's a man who knew that all those graves behind him were there because he told those men to go there, or he told the men who told the men who told the men to go there. Either way, he bore responsibility. He knew that most of those men would be middle-aged men at that moment when he was standing there with Walter Cronkite. And while he kept his composure throughout the entire special, and, you know, he was looked well and he spoke well and all that. If you look into the eyes in this picture, tell me there's a man. Tell me you don't see it. I bet you see it. There's a man who feels the weight of command and the moral responsibility of ordering men to their deaths, which is what leadership in combat ultimately comes down to. Of course, you don't want them to die, and you're trying to minimize casualties by doing everything you can. But the fact is, if you're going to go to war, you're going to lose people. And there's a man who's feeling that in his soul in that moment, I believe. I think it's a remarkable picture of Eisenhower. And I wanted to just leave that with you because, you know, I love military history. I love reading it. I love discussing it. I play war games to play out, you know, what ifs and all that. But the fact of the matter is that we can never forget is that war is a nightmare. War it's a horror. And although it may be necessary at times, it's never a good thing. So let's keep that in mind as we continue to honor the men who so richly deserve it, who gave their all for this country. Let's just remember what a horror it was, and let us cherish the peace that we have now. Till next week, so long.